Hi, welcome to the second part of my geometry nodes crystal tutorial in Blender. If you haven't seen the first part, I highly recommend to do that first if you want to follow along. Also, if you have any trouble with understanding what I'm saying, you can turn subtitles. Sorry for my English. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump into Blender and create the rest part of our crystal, and then we will do custom crystal shader. So we will start in the place when we ended the first part. This is currently our node tree. And now I want to add extra level of detail inside of our crystal to add a fracture to it. So I can fracture this solid crystal to the separate parts. It will look much better with the proper shader. This is our current result. I can change lighting, turn off scene light and scene world, and now I can use default Blender HDRI. This is our current result. And now we will add the final layer of detail, which will be interior fracture. So we will start by adding the volume cube node. And as you can see, we now have a volume cube, but I want to set the size of the volume cube to match our crystal size. So the volume cube would be something like that. And to do this, I can use the attribute statistic node. So I'm gonna use the base crystal mesh, drag it, and search for attribute statistic. And I want to use the position node to check the size of our crystal. And now I have the minimum and maximum output, and I can connect it to our volume cube, which is here. And now when I check this, it matches the size perfectly. We can actually do this different way, because now I'm using attribute statistics, but I also can use the bounding box. And the bounding box will also output minimum and maximum value, and when I connect the minimum to minimum and maximum to maximum, as you can see, nothing has changed. And the time of calculation is also the same. So you can choose any version you like. I'm gonna stick to maybe bounding box. It's one node, not two. And now I want to make my volume cube a little bit bigger, so it would be bigger than our crystal for better booleans after. So I can just multiply the minimum by small number like 1.2. And I can duplicate that node. And as you can see, my volume cube now is a little bit bigger than the crystal itself. Okay, so I can join this and call it maybe dimensions of volume cube. And now I would like to add a noise to our volume cube, because we will later turn it off to the mesh, which will be interior fracture of our crystals. Okay, so we can start simple by adding just noise texture and connect it to our density. As you can see, something changed, but the change is not very visible. So I would like to crank the contrast of it and use color ramp node. And now I have control over our density. So maybe something like this. would be better. But now the scale of our fracture is completely wrong. So I would like to edit it. Okay. So first I would like to plug something to the vector of our noise texture, and it would be the position node. It's something like the UV coordinates for textures. Now I can manipulate it easily. Okay, so I will add the multiply node, maybe like that. And as you can see, when I set it to 1, nothing changes, but now I can control the scale of my noise. So I would like to scale it down and make my noise more horizontal, maybe something like 0.16, and maybe scale it in z-axis to 1.2 maybe. And as you can see, my noise is much more horizontal now than before. Okay. Let's randomize our noise a little bit more. Between the position and multiply node, I would like to create another noise texture. Set it to 40. We can set this also to 40. And now I want to also crank the contrast with color lamp node. Let's change it to constant maybe. And now I can multiply this vector with this vector. And as you can see, I have another layer of detail in my noise. This is before, this is now. Okay, I could add a little bit more control with more multiply nodes. One here and one here. We can set up all to 1 for now. And as you can see, we have a lot of control with these nodes. I can control now the scale of this noise to make it also more horizontal. Okay, so I have a lot of control over my noise, and later on, when we all go to the meshing stage of our intersections, we will go back to maybe tweak some values, and to make it a little bit easier, we can add some parameters from outside. So I'm gonna add grid input node, and first I'm gonna connect the seed. Maybe we'll add something to the seed to create different variations. I also plug seed here, Ctrl H to minimize the size of the node. Okay, and I think this would do for now. I can join it and call it maybe 3D noise pattern. Okay. So now we go to the meshing stage. I would like to convert our volume cube to the mesh. So to do this, I can first use volume to mesh node. As you can see, we have our mesh. I would like to leave the default setting here, and now I would like to use the mesh boolean node. So we'll come back to our base crystal mesh. We have an inclusions, and I'm gonna use the mesh boolean node. Leave the crystal output. Now I change the difference to intersect. Oh, unplugged. Okay, I would like to plug it again. And I'm also gonna plug a volume cube here. And as you can see, our intersection, our fracture is now inside of the crystal. And now we can tweak some parameters inside our noise. For example, I would like maybe squish it more in the z-axis. Okay, let's maybe scale it like this, and now more in the axis, and let's change the contrast here, and maybe change the scale of this texture. Okay, let's preview now. We can also change the threshold here. And also we can increase our resolution from 32 to maybe 64. Okay. I probably would like some more changes here. Okay. Maybe okay, let's check it out now. Oh, this is much better result. I kind of like it, so I'm gonna leave it like that for now. And if you want to change anything, you can play with the multiplies values, also the scale and the contrast of the noise. So it's up to you to set up this for something that suits your needs. Now we can change the shading to smooth. Okay, and we can join it with the rest part of our crystal. So I'm gonna add join node here. So I'm gonna add join node here and plug our intersection inside of our join node. And I can preview it with wireframe. And as you can see, it takes the boolean to almost 2 seconds to run it. So I'm gonna add something called debug mode. And this would be just simple switch geometry node. I can plug it after set shade smooth node, and I'm gonna change it to false. And when it's set to false, it's fractured, and when it's set to true, it's not fractured. So I'm gonna plug it also as a group input. And I'm gonna call it debug mode. Okay, so as you can see, when I turn off debug mode, and as you can see, the fracture mesh is a little bit too big, so I would like to scale it, and for that I can use maybe here I can use scale element node. Okay, And the problem is here right now that I'm gonna switch to preview only this. When I set it for something like 0.8, as you can see, each individual fracture part is scaled in its own origin, and I would like to scale in the global origin of every fracture element. So to do this, I can create the bounding box, and now I can use attribute statistic node to capture statistic position, and now I have mean value, which I plug to center. And now when I scale the element, it is scaled along the center of whole thing. Okay, so now I can scale it some like a not too big number, maybe 0.9. And now the outside faces of a crystal mesh and the intersection mesh will not be overlapping. And I can preview it here. As you can see, we have no overlapping faces. Okay, so now we can join some parts. I would like to join this and call it maybe meshing. Okay, and now I can join all three parts and change color of the frame. And name it interior fracture. I can maybe adjust label size. Okay. So the last thing, I can just add simple transform, not trim curve. I can turn off debug mode, turn on debug mode to work a little bit faster. And I can add transform node. And I can create combine XY node and plug input into each of input of the node and connect to scale. And now I have a simple slider to adjust the scale of my crystal. We can call it scale. Okay. Now when I turn off debug mode, I can see my fracture, and as you can see, with each seed change, it creates completely different variation of our crystal, which is pretty cool. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it like that, and this is our final node setup. And now I can go to the shading part of our tutorial. So this is our final node tree for the geometry node system. We can call it crystal. And now I'm gonna go to shading tab. As you can see, this is our current result. And we can improve it significantly with the correct shader. So first I'm gonna create some details into the normal of our glass, and I start with the wave texture. Set the scale to 7 And with the Ctrl T shortcut, I can plug the texture coordinates and mapping. You need to unlock the Node Wrangler add-on to do this. And to make a little bit more variation, I would like also use first object mapping. And plug the noise texture here. After that I wanna use mix, and I will mix the noise output with our base coordinates. Not float but vector. We will adjust the slider later. Oh, as you can see, the effect is too intense. Maybe something like that. And as you can see now, I have the vertical wave texture, and I would like it to be horizontal, so you can change the X to Z. As you can see now, I have perfectly horizontal wave texture. So we can use it as a bump, plug it to bump node, and not strength but height, and we can connect the output of our bump node to the normal. And as you can see, we have our effect, but this is much too strong. So let's reduce the distance to something much smaller, maybe like 0.1. It's too strong still, maybe 0.05. Okay. It's still too strong. Okay, for now I will leave it like that, because I would like to add another layer of detail, and to do this I'm gonna use another noise texture, so I can just duplicate it, connect it, use the object coordinates, and adjust the scale a little. And now I'd like to add a little bit more contrast with color ramp node. I'm gonna crack the contrast like that and change the scale a little. To add another layer of detail, I also duplicate that node, set the scale to something much bigger, and add multiply after that. And as you can see, now I have two noises in one. I'm gonna use this as, and now I'm gonna multiply this noise and this noise. So I'll have a result like that. I'm gonna change the scale of this noise. Also, I'm gonna increase the contrast in this. And actually, I'm gonna add another layer of detail with the noise set to 15 and another multiply. And I'm gonna plug it like this. Maybe a little bit smaller with more contrast. Okay, something like that. Let's check it out. Let's connect it to height. As you can see, I think the effect is too little, so I'm gonna use 0.1 1. This is much better. And the last part of our bump, and the last part of our butt would be the Voronoi texture. I can use Ctrl T to plug mapping, and I'm gonna set it not to F1 but distance to edge. After that I'm gonna plug color ramp node and crack the contrast. Okay, I'm gonna increase the scale and decrease the scale, and I'm gonna use it as another bump. Duplicate the bump node and connect it to height. I'm gonna turn off this one for now. As you can see, the effect is a little bit weird, and that's because it still have this gradient here. To reduce it, we can really crank it. Even used another color ramp after. And now when I plug it to bump, as you can see, I have these lines. But I don't like have it everywhere. I only want in some parts. So I can increase scale. And also I would multiply it with the noise. So let's create a noise texture. Plug it into mapping. Also we can use object coordinates. Let's check the scale now. Oh, it's much too big. Something like that. And here something like that. I can also use the color lamp node here, crank the contrast, actually in opposite way, crank the contrast, and let's add the results. As you can see, with a little bit change, we don't have the Voronoi pattern everywhere. Let's preview it. Let's connect this to here. As you can see, we don't have this pattern everywhere. Okay. So let's connect the bump back to normal. And now I would like to add another layer of detail, which will be the volume of our crystal. So let's create the principal volume shader. Connect to volume, and let's set the color to white, and let's plug for density noise texture. Let's use color ramp, crank the contrast, and also we're gonna use map range node, but not the vector, but float, because this is black and white and this is black and white, so there's no need to use vector, and plug it into density. Let's preview the results. As As you can see, this is our current results. We can use the mapping for our noise texture, so I'm gonna use Ctrl T and plug an object to vector. Let's reduce the scale and let's check our results now. We can unconnect this for now to better see the results. Let's maybe some higher density, and we can also use the emission. As you can see, after using emission, I have much more milky result. But if I use the emission, I also am generating light, which will not always be the wanted result. So you can always turn this off. And when I connect the bump back to glass, as you can see, I have pretty good results already. So we have our shader for volume and for crystal for surface, but we can add another layer of detail, the final one, which will be the different color in the crystals. I would like to duplicate the glass node 3 times and set the color to be red, green and blue. We're gonna add value node and set it to 1.52 and plug it to IOR. Now I'm gonna use the add shader to add these two together and these two together. As you can see, there's no big changes between these two, of course, except for our bump for our normal input. But when I'm at the math node and set it 1 to duplicate it and 1 to add, 1 to subtract, and the bottom value to be, actually I'm gonna rename it to IOR, duplicate it and rename it to dispersion. And I'm gonna connect dispersion to the bottom socket of our math nodes. And after that, I'm gonna connect the IOR to the top socket. And like that. Of course, the value is much too high now. We want to set it to something small, like this. And now, as you can see, we have the slight color variation inside of our crystal. We can increase or decrease this effect with dispersion slider. I would like to keep it low, so 0.015 is good value for that. Okay, so now I'm gonna delete this glass node and plug our bump here. Okay, now as you can see, we have both dispersion and our bump information from noises. And as you can see, this is our result. We can change the HDRI to see it in different lighting conditions. Okay, so the last thing we can really change is add something to our roughness, because it's now set to standard value. So to do this, we can just take this and duplicate it, Alt P to unparent it from the frame, and let's duplicate this two times. Actually, I'm gonna Ctrl Shift D to preserve the input, and let's change the contrast and the scale in here and here, and let's multiply these three together. Let's change the color to float, factor to 1. Actually, I'm gonna use the math node for that. Let's set it to multiply and multiply these two color ramps together. And also let's use another multiply. So this is our result, a little bit too dark, I think. We can okay. We can plug our another color ramp after. Okay, I think this would be good. And we can plug this to the roughness input of our 3 dispersion glass shaders, not color roughness. I think it's a little bit too rough. Let's preview it in. So as you can see, this is our final result. We can change lighting to test in different live conditions. Okay. So if you want the final blend file, you can download it from the link in the description. You can also check my Blender geometry node asset packs, which are called Node. It contains a lot of crystals and a lot of variations. As you can see, this is our mountain gem, which is our crystal from tutorial, but with on a rock and another smaller crystals. We can easily draw it with curve tool. Okay, like that. But also we have a lot different crystals, like this garnet crystal, which also have a lot of settings, and we can change it with just a single seed value. And my favorite one is really cool because it generates crystal between 2 planes. So we can just move it and we'll generate another crystals between 2 planes, and it will be dynamically changing to fit more new geometry. Yeah, it looks like that. So thanks for watching and see you in the next part.